The Anthropocene. Okay. We are getting into kind of an interesting period of history from a big history perspective, because we are seeing a period of history where humanity absolutely dominates the planet. We're going to be covering 4 study guide questions, so let's jump in. Take a look at this picture. Isn't that incredible when you really look at it and think about it? Just the vast amount of people. So there's a debate going now in the geological world, biological world, on should we be calling our period the Holocene or the Anthropocene? And which leads us to our study guide question: why do many historians and scientists believe that we have left the Holocene era and entered the Anthropocene? So let's answer first. Well, actually, let's break down this question for a second, and then let's answer the question on a simple level, and we'll get into a discussion on it from there. What is the Holocene? Holocene essentially just means the most recent era. Really, I mean, Holocene just means the most recent or coming to full point era. But now we're kind of saying, wait a second, our era is different than, and this period is different than at any other time in, in history, defined by, geology. And so are we moving into something new? And there's a range here. The Anthropocene essentially just means it's named, it's kind of a Greek term, anthropo meaning human, and scene meaning new, so it's kind of the human new age, if you will, or the age of humanity. Now, humans have been on the planet for some time, but we have never truly dominated the planet like we do today. And so that's the argument. So some argue, A, should we change the name? B, really, when does the Anthropocene begin? Some argue as recent as 1964, with some of the most advanced nuclear weapons being created and tested. Some say the end of World War II, with the H-bombs being dropped. Others say, many other time periods they look to. Some say as early as 1604, when you really have, the connection of the 4 world zones really rapidly beginning to happen. And some say as early as the beginnings of agriculture, 10,000 years ago. And definitely humans have been kind of changing the planet since then. Let's simply answer this question, and this question, then we'll get into a discussion on it. Why do many historians and scientists believe that we have left the Holocene and entered the Anthropocene? Simply put, because man has become so dominant upon the face of the planet. I'll give you some examples of this. Probably the most apparent example is the extinction rate. There's about 8.7 million species on the planet today. So the pre-Anthropocene rate of extinction was roughly 1 species per year per 1 million species. Okay. Now today it has accelerated. The Anthropocene has accelerated the extinction rate to 100 to 1,000 times the normal rate. Let's just say it's 100 times the normal rate. With 8.7 million species, that's roughly, let's just round up to 9 species per year would be the normal rate. 90 to 9,000 species is the current rate. This is a major shift. Now, you might argue, hey, Mr. Hellstone, we've seen major extinction events in the past, and the planet survived and was fine. Yeah, you're right. You're right. We have. But what's fascinating is in the past, all extinction events have drastically affected pretty much all species. Some more than others, of course, and obviously some survived. But it drastically affected them all. Humanity is growing and thriving. We're increasing in our population significantly. 6 billion people in the last 100 years more now live on the planet. In a 100-year period, 6 billion people more. It's amazing how many people are living on our planet. We're predicted to top out at about 10 billion. So you have one species that is dramatically thriving and growing and dominating, causing the mass extinction of many, many others. So this is significant. in world history, and is the major argument behind why we would shift to the Anthropocene, or the human era, if you will, today. So thoughts on this? There's a lot of people who kind of want to debate. Well, we've had problems in the past, or maybe it's being exaggerated and so forth. Even the most conservative estimates have us down to about 100 times the normal rate. This is significant. Humanity is affecting the planet. Here's the nice thing, though, possibly, or here's the hope. Unlike, let's say, other predatory species, we are aware of it. Maybe not perfectly aware of it, but aware of it, and can do something about it. How and what we should do is remaining to be seen, and will do is remaining to be seen. But definitely the planet is, becoming more and more aware of it, or the people of the planet are becoming more and more aware of it, and we're trying to do something about it. So I think that's a good thing. I think that's definitely, a good thing. Here, give you an idea of just more recently some of the extinctions that are going on and threatening to go on all over the world. The red is animals that have gone extinct recently, and animals that are on the verge of going extinct in the yellow. Okay, so next study guide question. Why did the rate of change increase so dramatically during the last 500 years? David Christian gives 3 reasons why, 3 reasons why. Number 1, the connection of the 4 world zones. Just by connecting us all into one system, if you will, of collective learning instead of, separate systems of collective learning, we've rapidly increased the significance of, Tanner, did you have a comment right now? Go for it.
Yeah, I was going to ask, this is a little bit unrelated, but I was curious, how is it that New Zealand and such is part of this, the Pacific World Zone? Like, it's closer to Australia than it is to, say, Hawaii, yet New Zealand and Hawaii are in the same world zone, whereas New Zealand and Australia aren't, And then there's the one island up there right next to, I think, Bolivia. I don't know what island that's called, but yeah, that's pretty close right there to the America's world zone, I guess, yet it's considered to be in the same club as Hawaii, even though it's way further away from that. I don't know. I just always find it curious. I mean, like...
We have actually talked about that a little bit. I can't remember if it was in this class or not, but someone else asked a similar question. It seems like, why is, because they're so much closer, but it is, ancestrally speaking, the peoples of the Maori people of New Zealand are closer related to the people of Hawaii, and come from those same people, are the same lineage, as opposed to the indigenous people of Australia. Does that make sense? So they look at it in terms of how they were connected. And when we say that this 4th one is a world zone, that's an extremely loose term for that group. In a way, you really could say there's 3 world zones, and then there's kind of this 4th grouping of people that don't really qualify as collective learning, because some of them are so far from each other that while they came from the same source and populated the islands from that source, they aren't exactly interconnecting very often. So there's little to no collective learning happening other than what's happening on their own islands. Does that make sense? So, but it is an ancestral thing, where the peoples come from, is how they've determined that. Yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, so again, why did the rate of change increase dramatically? Connection of the 4 world zones is a major reason. Increase in free commerce, which involves governmental systems, governmental philosophy, right? Governance, significant changes to the way we govern, opening up commerce, and so forth, so allowing the world to really trade. And we've only seen that increase in the last 50 years, let alone the last 500 years. More and more countries have opened themselves to trade, opened themselves because they see the wealth that can come from it. And then lastly, increase of new sources of energy. And so, the exploitation of that energy has been pretty significant. Now, with that said, what's fascinating, though, is a lot of people don't realize how limited those resources really are. According to estimates right now, and these are actually pretty conservative estimates, We have about 46 years left on oil, 63 years left on natural gas. I mean, 46 years, who plans to be living 46 years from now? 63 years, natural gas, 119 years, coal. And this does take into account the average expansion of new discoveries of deposits.